Hello. Welcome to this session, rather fancifully titled Revenge of the Book. I don't know what that means either, but you can see if it means anything at the end of the session. I'll tell you where this comes from. We're going to start with something that I suppose it could be considered a controversial thought, but almost everybody seems to already know this, or at least think they know it, and that is that people learn more and better from paper text than they do from electronic text. You often read things that say, studies have shown that, and then they'll say people learn more from paper than they learn from electronic forms. And I have an emerging theory in my mind about why this is true. But since this is just vague as all get out, I thought that perhaps we would start by trying to mix in a little objective stuff. That is, we'd take the studies have said that part of the presentation and actually find some of these studies and tell you what they say. So that at least that little part of the presentation would give you a feeling of having learned something, or at least having done the sort of stuff that you're supposed to do in scholarly conferences. But the further we got into it, the further we thought, you know, it's really not all that clear when you look at the research results. Notwithstanding that, I continue to think that that's true. So we finally come up with a view of the literature that supports my prejudices on this, and we'll come around to that eventually. But at least initially, I want to take you through this little bit of literature review. Or actually, I want Pauline, my colleague, to take you through the literature review, because after all, she's a reference librarian, and she knows how to do this, to go to the literature and find out what it says. And this is it. This is what it says.
Thank you. So, you know, the whole thing, the studies that show that, that's where Dan pulls me in. He says, yes, you need to go and find that. And so I did some research, and I was looking through the materials, and we find that a lot of the big research that came through this happened in the 80s, and it was really inspired by an accident that happened in 1978, where a professor gave a test to a bunch of his students, and a few of them, about 7 or 8 of them, actually had to take their exam using a computer. And when he got the results back, he was very surprised, because basically what happened, the people who took the study or the exam on the computer, they took twice as long as the people who were using just plain old paper. And he thought, well, you know, maybe that's just because the technology is bad. It takes a long time for those lines to go through all the screen in 1978. So he discounted some things, and he still found that basically the people who had to take the test on their computer was about 30-40% slower than people who, oh my goodness, we have a mistake. Okay. People who actually use the computer to do reading were about 30% slower than the people who just use paper. So this just kind of sparked off all sorts of research in the 80s. And what happened was that people started to go and say, well, let's see if this statistic, 30% slower, worse than what was across the board on a bunch of different tasks. And so researchers would go and pull out some subjects and say, you know, why don't you read this paragraph? It's 100 words. Just read it, and then we'll ask you some questions about it afterwards. And they did that with people just using paper, and then they gave the same paragraph to people, but they had to go and use a computer screen. They also went and they tried different tasks. They said, well, you know, here is a document, and there are 49 mistakes in it. Let's see how fast you can find these mistakes. Or they would just go and give them long hours of tests where they were reading through it, and they just had to go and find the mistakes that they had, and they didn't tell them what the mistakes were. Or they wanted to see, you know, here is some text. Let's just see how fast you can read this and digest this information. And basically, after all these different kinds of tests, the outcome basically was this. When there were people who were reading online, it generally was slower, sometimes 15 up to 30, it kind of varied, but basically slower when you read stuff online as opposed to when you read stuff in print. And the other thing that happened too is they found that reading comprehension kind of fell off too, maybe a little bit, not as much as the speed. So generally I think this is where the start of all of this, you know, you can learn better, you can read more when you're reading in paper as opposed to reading online. Now, these all studies happened in the 80s. Of course, the people in the early 90s are saying, you know, this isn't really fair. You can't go and compare using a really nice, beautiful print page and then have someone expect to get any kind of results that are comparable when they're looking at a CRT screen that's black and it's green, it's got ugly colors, it's very slow. Let's go and see if we can go and duplicate that now that we're in the 90s and we have new technology. Let's see if these things can be duplicated, and let's see if the results are the same. So these people in the early 90s, they did the same studies. They wanted to test for speed, for accuracy, for reading comprehension. They wanted to see, now that we have new technology that duplicates the high resolution of paper on the screen, is this going to be the same or is it going to be different? And the results were that, it seems that it was kind of balanced out and kind of equal. That people who read things online with the high-resolution new technology screens could basically do the same thing as they could in paper in the same amount of time. But then these people got kind of wise and they said, you know what, we can also test for other things and see if that makes it better. So they added new tests and they said, I know you can read these things. Let's go and find particular parts of the document. Let's go and see how fast you can find the part of the document that talks about kiwi fruit. And of course, the people who are using the computers and the online, they're a lot faster because it's easier for them to go and scroll and point and find things because of the technology of the computer. So now the thought started to change, and it was like, well, maybe reading things online was a little bit better than reading things on paper. Then you get to kind of like the late 90s, and they're saying, well, you know what? We've actually been looking at this all wrong. We really should not be looking at or worrying about what the outcome was. Can these people do it faster? It's not a contest to see, who can find the most typos, who can do things faster. Really, we should be looking at the process of reading. What are the tasks that people do when they're reading, so that we can really say, what is it that makes reading on paper or reading online better or worse than each other? The other thing that they criticized was that when you were looking at the tests that happened in the 80s, they were really taking kind of like the reading aspect out of these tests. I mean, normal people do not go and read 100-word paragraphs and then answer questions about them. They're saying that they're doing it was very artificial. Well, as it says, they created tasks that were only vaguely reminiscent of reading. People who proofread don't know automatically that there are 49 errors in their paper. These things were just not lifelike. These really didn't measure up what reading was in real life. So another aspect was that there's actually things about paper that you could do that you really couldn't duplicate online. And they wanted to see, well, how much of these things that you could do with paper, how much that affected the process of actually reading and doing your task. So one of the studies that kind of illustrated this point about looking at the process of reading and actually looking at the task that you're doing was a study that came out in 1997 by O'Hara and Sellon. They're researchers at Europark for Xerox. And what they did was, instead of just saying, read this paragraph, answer these questions, they told their subjects, read this article, it's a 4-page article, and then from that, we want you to summarize your results in a little statement, a little paragraph statement. And they gave the same article to people who read it only online on a computer, and they gave the same article to people who had it in paper. And in order to make things equal, they had a very good computer system set up to make the document a very high readability. They had paper available for the people who are reading it in paper, so they could take notes and write their summary. They had separate documents up on the computer screen so people can go and keep their different tasks separately. And then they just told them, we're going to videotape you and watch you and see what you actually do in order to accomplish this task. Read this article, write the summary. And these are some of the things that they found out about what was really interesting about the reading process and the physical piece of paper. One of the things that they've observed is that when people are reading, a lot of times they want to go and manipulate the paper. It's a 4-page article, but maybe they want to go and look at the whole thing at once so that you can unstaple it and put the 4 sheets of paper on your desk in front of you to be able to go and look at all the different things at once. You want to look at the whole article because maybe you want to go and connect different parts of the article to each other. You can't really do that when you're online because, well, if you did and you kind of had to miniaturize it, the text would be really, really, really tiny. And you couldn't really tell what it was. You would just know that the information was there. One of the other things that they thought was very good too is that a lot of times people, when they're writing, they go and they annotate and they put notes in the corner and they highlight it. I know that in class, you underline things, you asterisk things, you draw lines to connect different ideas so that you can recognize, oh, I need to go back and look at that again. In 1997, when the study came out, it was still a little bit awkward to try to do that with a word processing program. I mean, you could still highlight and do things, but you couldn't really write notes in the margins to tell you, aha, this is a key point I want to put in my summary. Another problem was that on online, if you wanted to go and look between your different documents, you had to switch out back and forth. You had to make sure that one document was another. It was very difficult to look at the two documents at once unless you did some manipulation and cut the screen in half. So you had one document on one side and one on the other. And then it still made it awkward because you still weren't seeing quite as much as a document as you did if you had your paper spread in front of you. On the other hand, if you were in print, you could go and spread that out. You could look at two documents at once. You can turn one sideways, make notes. You could read one and have your hand on another and be able to go and switch out whenever you need it. It was very convenient. And that brought up another point that these researchers thought that was very significant. When you're actually physically handling the paper, you actually have two hands to help you with the task of what you're doing. You could be reading along, one hand could be holding it, and the other hand helping you turn the page so that the whole reading process is very smooth and automatic. You could be writing something and decide, oh, I need to quote some exact language, and you can have your finger on one document and some words while you're writing with another. Conversely, when you're online, you only have one hand because you're using the mouse. You use the mouse to manipulate where you're going to be, what you're going to do with the text, and your other hand really, it's not really helping you manipulate the documents. And so what they realized was that there is a really strong relationship between the actual physical paper and the physical document itself and the task that they had to do to accomplish their reading. And so it's very interesting, and I don't want to mislead you because these researchers were undertaking their tasks because they really wanted to see what is it about paper, and then they wanted to bring these elements to be able to read text online. They had different goals. But I think when we're going back to Dan's original premise that people can read better using print than they can online, I think this goes more to explain why everyone just kind of assumes that's true and believes that. It's because these are things that we do all the time, and then I think it's a little bit more satisfactory answer than, oh, it's just because we can do this particular task, 15% faster than we can online. So, to conclude, I'm sure that there's some sort of moral in this particular, just examination of the literature, and Dan will probably tell you about that. He's my boss, so he gets to do that kind of stuff. And so I give the mouse to Dan.
Okay, thank you. If this seems a little vague and unfocused, don't worry, it's getting even more so. First of all, I'd like to I thought of saving this to the end, hoping that it would come as kind of a revelation, that it would all make sense in context of this, but I'm not at all sure that will happen ever, so I think maybe I'll put it up front. Here's the theory, that the three dimensions of the document, that the document in space is a useful representation of something more abstract, an information space that you're trying to traverse with your reading. That's what's important about the physical paper, that it is three-dimensional and you have that kind of feeling for the subject you're looking at. I think that this is the source of a lot of the observed preference people have for paper, and I think that this has a lot to do with whether and when computers become as good a way to learn as paper has been in the past. I think that one of the things that we're going to have to do is address this spaciness of physical documents and figure out how to get that translated into the virtual world. I will have a few unhelpful comments about that presently. Just a few other things, though. I don't think it's really controversial that people like paper. How can you tell that people like paper? There's a line at the fast printer in the computer lab. People do not want to read from the screen. They read about 50 words from the screen, and then they say, life is too short for this. I'm going to send a job to the fast printer. They would rather spend their time waiting in line. The fact that very few people have read an entire book from a computer screen. How many people have read an entire book from a computer screen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Well, that's fair representation. But think about the group, too. If there are people in the world that are going to be reading books from computers, they're probably the kind of people that are in this room. The fact that most of you haven't suggested that there are substantial annoyance factors that need to be overcome before we're actually going to do this. Something that we look at locally. I work for West, and we look at the online use of cases in statutes. The fact of the matter is, people read cases online a lot, but statutes not so much. In fact, looking at it financially, we can look at the relative price of cases and statutes. Now, I'm not going to divulge industry secrets or something. I have an extraordinarily simple diagram to make my point here. That is this. We have discovered empirically that people will pay more money for cases electronically, but they will pay less money for statutes electronically. See, even accountants and so forth can read this. You can imagine where I've used this before. And so if you're us, which of course you're not, almost all of you, almost without exception, you all are real people, but you start thinking about that, what's the difference between cases and statutes which makes one of them successful in an electronic presentation and the other not so successful? And I'd submit that it's statutes are in context. You see, cases are already out of context. One case has essentially nothing to do with the case before it and the case after it in the reporter, so you're not losing anything. You're not losing any useful physical information by taking it out, as long as you can at least go to the fast printer and read the whole case online. But statutes have a very rich context. They're near the other statutes. They've got the annotations. They've got all sorts of good stuff there that makes you feel value from the physical location of this in the book. That's why rich people read their cases in paper and their cases online and their statutes in paper, and poor people do just the opposite. All right, another sort of autobiographical part to this. I want to tell you about a program I did. There was a session at Legal Tech New York. I can't remember the exact year. It might have been '98. And the premise was that, actually my task, sort of the way it was presented to me, is make Westlaw on the web look good. We were each assigned a piece of research to do. We got it a couple of weeks in advance so we could prepare it. And then we were supposed to step through the accomplishment of this research task, showing why our system was so good. And of course, part of the unspoken subtext to this always is, so why isn't it free? What is it about your fabulously expensive system that causes me to want to spend lots of money for it instead of going to the web, the great source of free information, and doing it there? I had a story that I thought actually worked pretty well under the circumstances. I used this research method. First of all, I made a few remarks about the kind of question I got. And I got a question that was just a fastball down the middle of the plate. I couldn't have asked for better. It was a heavily procedural question. It was back in... it had to do with the appointment of a special master to monitor compliance with a consent decree in the context of the Microsoft antitrust litigation at an early stage. It was just the kind of thing that didn't work very well for just a plain old free text keyword search. So the way I did it is I did a simple word search and found the applicable section of Wright and Miller. And then I jumped to one of the leading cases cited by Wright and Miller. Then I picked up a key number from the leading case, and I ran a search on that. And lo and behold, in a very few steps, I had a good collection of cases, all having to do with the propriety of appointing a special master to monitor compliance with a consent decree. However, there is an ugly secret to this. That notwithstanding that this was the program I gave, this was the presentation, it is not, in fact, what I did. Here's what I did when I was actually doing the research. How it really happened. First of all, I found the right section of Wright and Miller with a simple word search. This much is true. Second, I read it. But now comes the important part. I got up. I found a paper copy of Wright and Miller somewhere, and I read a bunch of stuff that told me nothing. I read a bunch of irrelevant junk. And then step 4 is as I described it before. The point is that this third step was crucially important to me, even though I didn't get any useful information, at least in one sense. What was going on there? The point is that I got this section of Wright and Miller, and it looked pretty good. It looked like it was talking about the propriety of appointing special masters to monitor consent decrees and so forth. But I didn't have it in the context of the rest of Wright and Miller. And I was terrified that I was going to get up and do this presentation before real lawyers who actually knew. Some of them were going to know this stuff. And I wanted to make sure I was right. The point is that while it looked relevant, I wanted to make sure that there wasn't something else lurking there that would have created the exception or said, unless, of course, you're Dan, in which case it's something else, that there was going to be some part of this that would alter my understanding. Now, in fact, there wasn't. In fact, I had looked at just the right section of Wright and Miller, but psychologically, I wasn't ready to trust it because I didn't feel that I was controlling the space. What I wanted to know is not just Wright and Miller have given me this citation to a case that will be useful to me. What I wanted to know is I know what Charles Allen Wright knows about this, because if he'd known anything else, he would have told me. And that's what was missing until I got up and did step number 3 here. I gave a presentation at CALI a couple of years ago. This is the only slide in common between the two, but I think there's at least some point of contact between what I did in my mangy dog talk, and I want to review this briefly because I think this brings some of it in perspective. There are 3 things that legal researchers are trying to accomplish when they do legal research. The first, dullest and least interesting, is understanding. They go to the literature saying, what is the state of the law? And the literature tells them the state of the law is X. There is something that I don't know that I would like to know. I like the system to explain it to me. This is one of the things that has to happen. But you can make a lot of mistakes if you try to construct a legal research system thinking this is all that happens, because this is by no means all that happens. So what else is happening in lawyers' use of the literature that's not so true of other people? Well, first of all, you've got to rearrange the question a little bit. The lawyer is usually not going to the literature saying, what is the state of the law on X? They know that the right view of the law is that my guy wins. What they need is not a dispassionate view of the state of the law. They need the document that says, your guy wins. That is, they need legal research tools which are so flexible that they're capable of making the compelling case for whatever it is you need it to say. You need power tools. Third, however, you want safety. Not only do you want the case that says you win, you also want the sense that you won't lose. And in some ways, this is an even more characteristic part of legal research habits, I think, than the need for power and understanding. That is safety. I want to know what anybody else knows about this. Say, during my short, not terribly successful experience practicing law, one of the ways I encountered this was when, as a young attorney in a large law firm, my supervising partner told me one day, Dan, I want you to know as much about the state of the law on the day you file your answer as you're going to know the day after the appeal is decided. That is, I don't want you to act until you know all of the documents that anybody might know about. I want you to anticipate all the law there is to know. I want you to cover the whole space. That's what I was missing in my legal tech presentation. I had an answer. I had a pretty good story to tell. What I didn't have was a sense of completeness, a sense that I had exhausted the possibilities. Now, of course, I didn't really exhaust the possibilities, but I did at least get to the point of saying, if there had been something else in Wright and Miller, I would have picked that up. All right, let me, since this is becoming sort of confessional in certain senses, let me talk about another personal peculiarity of mine, which works into this a slightly different way. I have a collection of music at home, and I have an approach I've taken for many years to adding things to my collection of music. That is, I tried it just last night in the local Borders here. I walk into a store with a pretty good music collection, and I ask myself, where would it be if they had an entire disc of sea shanties? Like that. Now, why would I do this? It is not because I'm particularly fond of sea shanties. It is because sea shanties has come to represent for me a category I can only call hopelessly miscellaneous. That is, when in your music store you find the disc of sea shanties, it's right next to the weirdest stuff. And that's the stuff I want. So I want things like the animal songs of Flanders and Swan. I want 100 years of American circus music. I want instrumental music from the American Revolution. I want, oh, this is great, a gay barbershop quintet singing, as far as I know, the definitive version of Teddy Bear's Picnic. Just to die for. A wonderful disc. I want songs of protest in the late 19th century. I want body songs every once in a while. I want Carmen Miranda before she... Actually, the cover art is sort of deceptive here. This was before she was discovered by Hollywood. This is her Portuguese stuff. This is what I'm looking for when I go look for the sea shanties. How does this work out? Well, I ran into a problem. That is, if you have one of these peculiar collections, eventually you're forced to go online because people are always telling you that. So how do you find sea shanties on Amazon.com? Well, here's the problem. You can find sea shanties on Amazon.com. You just put in the word and you get sea shanties and nothing else. I'm not really looking for sea shanties, but I found this disc. It's the first time I had ever found a disc of sea shanties, so I bought it. In fact, I now have 3 discs of sea shanties. And I confirmed my suspicion that I have no special interest in sea shanties. The point is, what I was able to do in the physical music store that I couldn't do on Amazon.com is find this little corner. Not all stores have it, but when you find one, it's really a treasure. You find the hopelessly miscellaneous section. You find the place where all the weird stuff that they can't figure out what to do with accumulates. That's what I was looking for. That's what I wanted, not sea shanties. And while there are various ways to navigate Amazon.com in all sorts of creative ways, there isn't a good way to say to it, show me the hopelessly miscellaneous. Yes?
It occurs to me that in some senses Amazon.com does it better than the store because they have the section that says people who have bought this
Yes.
also bought.
Yes, exactly. One of the things that you can do in Amazon.com is you can find people with your weird taste. I could look at any of these things and see if people who have bought them also buy other things that appeal to me. Although, I'm not sure I want to be associated with the people who buy a lot of these. But yeah, yes, that's one of the new paradigms that's replacing the hopelessly miscellaneous section in the store. This leads me into just a couple of remarks about the whole process of classification. Because you see, the difference between my experience in the store and my experience in Amazon is in the store I'm getting the benefit of a certain kind of classification. Somebody has opened up all the boxes of stuff, looked at it, and sorted it into categories. Now, I guess the categorization is mainly of use to people that are not like me and really do want jazz or something else that's identifiable. It's probably peculiar to want the stuff that doesn't go anyplace else. But the point is to put it all out where you can browse it. Classification in this kind, though, takes its shape from the collection. People like to browse, and the collection explains itself. Everything has to be somewhere. Compare that to searching. Searching discourages browsing. I can't browse Amazon in the same way. I have to search. I have to say, gosh, I have to stare at that blank screen and wring out of my tortured soul what it is I want to look at. Of course, Amazon does its best to avoid this by having helpful suggestions. Well, I get amusing suggestions from Amazon based on the other things I have bought from them. I guess what I wanted to know here is not only is there some tension between basically a classification approach to how information is organized and a searching approach, but there's a new kind of creature around which is essentially searching masquerading as classification. And I'll say a bit about that briefly. Now, this is one of my all-time favorite pieces of clip art. I found this on the Microsoft website, and I figured that if I didn't use it, no one else would. I've used it over and over again, and this is what it represents to me. You see, the ice fisherman, maybe this plays better in Minnesota than it plays in Boston, but the ice fisherman is a searcher. You see the line and so forth, that's technology. And this is information. This is stuff that you're searching for. The point is, there's a certain kind of searching that feels like that. There's a big frozen layer of opaque stuff between you and the things you're looking for. And you sort of bait your hook and you put it down into the depths that you can't see. You're really removed from any kind of browsability because there's a terrific wall. Fishing at the best of times doesn't support really browsing for fish very well. But ice fishing is particularly like this. The cow, however, the cow represents West Publishing Company. This is a swimming cow, a cow who can go down and who knows what's down there and swims and perhaps persuades fish to bite your line. I don't know, I've used this in various ways. But the point is that you want an intermediary to go down there and find the stuff for you so you don't feel quite so removed from it. If you can't go down under the ice to look for the fish, perhaps there's something that the system can do that will give you more of a feel for being there where the fish are. Let's talk about conventional classifications. By this I mean something like library call numbers. That is, you get each item, you've got to put one number on it. It can only go one place and it's got to go somewhere. Or perhaps you throw it away, but you know, if you're going to keep it, it's going to go somewhere. Classification is then, by convention, mutually exclusive and collectively exhausted. Everything belongs in exactly one place. This means that to a good extent you're applying the principle of literary warrant. That is, because you're working from items that have to go somewhere, the items are explaining the collection. You don't create headings you don't need. You do create the ones you do. And so the collection shapes it. So even if... So think about the music store again. If you have gay barbershop quintets in your music offerings, you've got to think of some place to put them. And even if you didn't imagine that there should be a hopelessly miscellaneous section, or I don't know where else that goes, you've got to put it somewhere. So the collection sort of insists on creating these pockets of stuff that do this. On the other hand, query-based classification, first of all, it's like a new product we've got called key search. And there are other things that it's like too, although I don't want to go too deeply into it. Unlike conventional systems, ideas can live everywhere. There's no sense of a unique classification. You classify something everywhere you want it to be. It can be as many places as it needs to be. And that's almost certainly a good idea. The idea that you don't have a single location from a document, you have a document living in a virtual sense every place it needs to be. But part of the problem is that in these systems, some documents live nowhere. That is, you can have a system which has full citizens of the system that don't live anywhere. So you can build a system that is not shaped so much by the collection as by the user. First of all, if it's a little vague, this is, I promise you, this is my only sort of product shot here. This is a shot from Key Search, but just to illustrate what this query-based classification is. This is employment law discrimination based on marital or family status. You found this through a Yahoo-like interface. That is, you started at the top level and chose employment law, and then you chose discrimination and so forth down the line. What is it that makes this work? Well, it's not that anybody's classed documents directly to this thing. They haven't. What we've done is we've created a query that identifies those documents for you. Now, this is sort of a pathological example of a query. Because, in fact, the key number system, which still calls a lot of employment law topics by the unhelpful notion master and servant, doesn't have a really good place to put these discrimination cases, so they're scattered through the topic civil rights and constitutional law and a couple of other places, and you have to have some really elaborate search logic to get at it. But the point is that what we've done here is we've built something that looks like a classification system, but what makes it work is not the process of the documents having come up one by one and being slotted into those places. We're simply projecting another classification system on it. So some of the documents live many, many places, and some of the documents live nowhere at all. Now,
yeah, what is that?
yes.
That last phrase, I don't understand.
That is, there are cases that will not drop for a search on any key search category because they just don't happen to have any of the terms that would cause them to come through.
It's the lost cases.
Yeah. They're lost cases. Lost in a way that a book can be misfiled, but if it's properly classified, a book is always, in some sense, available in an OpenStack library, because it's got to be somewhere where you can find it. This is an organizational system where not everything needs to be somewhere. On the other hand, things can be all over the place. Now, I don't mean to suggest to you that this is not good stuff. We're very pleased with this, and judging by our usage statistics, a lot of people think that it's comparable to sliced bread. Lots of people are using this, but I think it represents a new kind of classification that is going to look like old-fashioned classification in a lot of ways, and yet it's going to have some different characteristics that will take some getting used to. Final point, talk a little bit about electronic books. I'm a great fan of electronic books. Let me show you the one I've got. This is the RCA 1200 ebook. I've got half a dozen electronic books. One of the things as a director of R&D at a publishing house, I just assume that I get to play with the good toys when it comes to things like electronic books. One of the reasons I like my job. And this, as far as I know, is the best example. I've got it here. I was going to put it on the document camera, by the way, but the document camera is lower resolution than it is. And I thought it looked bad. To get a low-res image of its high-res screen, I thought was sort of defamatory to it. I guess, well, this is a long way away from where one needs to be in order to bridge the gap between useful electronic presentations and paper presentations. There are certain things about this that I think really are key. First of all, this is a good way to read a book. I've read literally dozens of books from this thing. I read 2 newspapers almost every day from it. It represents something that's light and portable, that has good resolution. I can have 50 books in the one unit. I mean, there are just all sorts of cool things about it. But the part I want to focus on is this thing at the bottom, which I'll blow up here. What is that? Well, in some ways, this is a page number. Again, it's not entirely clear what's going on here, but you'll see that over on the left side here, you've got page 1, and then it's on page 2, up to page 388 of Augustine's Confessions. And then you've got this slider bar, and the number on that changes as you slide it across. Now, what's happening here? First of all, almost all of the ebooks have such a device on them. And I think it's crucial to their acceptance, to the extent that they've been accepted at all, because they're doing something important with the sense of space. What they're doing is they're taking the unseen third dimension of the book, and they are rotating it 90 degrees and making it visible to you. So that unlike a computer screen where you look like you're not reading a book but reading a page, this gives you a sense of location within the document, more of a sense of how far along you are. I am 80% of the way through this book because my slider is over about there. It's a way of trying to give you an electronic representation of the space. And that's important. Now, there are a lot of things these electronic books don't do. We actually published a couple, or we did, a couple of our books in electronic book format. You can get, say, your federal civil and criminal rules that way, plug them in, they're always up to date. It's sort of cool. But this format has not cut up with where you need to be for the kind of browsing back and forth, rapid reference, nonlinear reading, the sorts of things that do with paper books. The electronic book is optimized for reading novels. It's a good way to read novels. In fact, there are really cool things you can do with an electronic book. You're on page 480, and there's a character, and you can't remember what it is you know about that character. Well, you just touch it and then ask the nice ebook to show you the first instance of that string. So you go back to where that character was introduced. Remind yourself what it is you're supposed to know about that character and go back. It's a cool situation. But, as I say, it seems to me that it suggests that, at least in a limited way, people are beginning to attack this problem about representing the space. Okay, so what is the moral? Well, let me elaborate on it a little bit. There's one level of understanding that you get when you know what a document says. But that's not sufficient for a lot of people. What is important, particularly in a lot of kinds of legal research, is knowing what a document can say. That is, you want to know not just what a case says, but you want to know something about the line of cases in which it is embedded. Or you want to know not just what this section of the statute says, but you want to have some generalizations about the statutory regime. You want the document in the context of the other documents. And that is what the electronic presentations have mostly ignored. And that, I think, is why people will not pay us fabulously outrageous sums in order to look at online statutes, why treatises have not done terribly well for online presentations, and why many of you have never read a full book from an electronic device. Getting rid of a lot of the annoyance factors, that's already happened. You can get one of these. You may not be able to get the content you want on it, but there is a reasonable way to handle this business of having something reasonably portable, fun to read in bed, it's backlit, you don't need any other light, so your partner won't object, so forth. That part is being addressed, and what needs to be addressed, and one of the things that we're working on in various ways at West, although I have to tell you, this is a subtle problem and it's not clear exactly what you need to do, is how to restore to the electronic researcher the same sort of feeling of satisfaction you get from a paper book that is, as I say, it has more to do with feeling that you know what was not written as well as what you've read. That you've seen the boundaries of the situation and not just individual objects in the space. You know what the space is concerned with. And so, I wrote this last night, I'm getting a little carried away. I want to know what is not written. And the deep knowledge is in the white space at the edge of the text. That's when I feel good about my research, is when I have a sense of the documents embedded in the space. And the white space itself, I think, is important. It's one of the first things to go when you try to pack more into computer display. You get rid of the white space. The white space represents to people the boundaries, the delimitation of what is said and what is not said. And white space is making a comeback, I hope. All right. That's all, folks. But are there any questions or comments or ripe fruit you'd like to address either to me or to Pauline? Yes?
About that last point, I'm just wondering whether that white space is a mindset that we have because we grew up with books. These boundaries, there's a boundary to what, these boundaries are artificial in many ways, and I think that's the contrast with the electronic medium, particularly this notion of hypertext that you can go forever and ever. It's uncomfortable, but maybe that's the way the law really is.
Well, yeah, maybe, but I guess I'd say that if it's uncomfortable, it's not working. And it may be that the reaction has to be we have to get comfortable in a different kind of information space. And maybe there's a generational difference. Maybe those of us who cut our teeth on paper books will just always have odd feelings that are imperfectly understood by people used to absorbing all of their information electronically. But I think that something has got to take its place. I think that there's got to be some convention, there's got to be some way of looking at electronic text that give you the same feeling of wholeness and completeness that's missing, at least for most of us, in the way we approach it. And there are ways that you can talk yourself into doing it. The chief way you do it with a Boolean search, you say is, you know, I am sure that you could not say anything worthwhile about my topic without writing the document in such a way that it would drop from my Boolean search. That is, I've got the boundaries that are represented by this Boolean search, and I believe in them. And I like to think that that constrains what might be said about it. We know from experience that those boundaries are largely illusory. But if that makes you feel better about it, that's all to the good. Sorry. Yes, Jim.
I guess one question I have is, I think this business of white spaces and knowing the boundaries and knowing what's not written and what written and what didn't say is I mean, it obviously tells you something. It gives you information. But I wonder about generations coming up who didn't cut their teeth on paper books, and maybe they're losing. How do we know that they're not losing the sense of that there is more information out there than what you're seeing on the screen right now? Now, how does this relate to the quality of the research that's being done, and how is that going to affect the quality of?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You can make a case that later generations are simply going to think in a different way because they're not used to thinking in these sort of closed boxes governed by authoritative text like Wright and Miller.
I agree with you about the importance of browsing, but I feel that you're making a very unfair comparison. I feel that you compare a fully evolved system with a very early system. You know, if you go into an established library of an established university, you can be reasonably assured that the collection will be complete, or at least that there's somebody who will tell you whether the collection is complete or not. I feel it's unfair to take this paradigm that has evolved over several centuries and compare it with a paradigm that is very new.
That is an entirely valid criticism, but I guess what I'd suggest is that maybe we can see into the future of this by looking at some of the new features it's going to have to acquire in order to meet.
On the other hand,
it's
very interesting that with the development of the web, some of the earlier database techniques that had been evolving on less powerful machines, which were based on coding and not on full-text searching, have been lost. And I think it is much less a general problem, as I think you are putting it, than a problem of a technical, at a relatively simple technical level, that will be overcome again. There was this move from coded schemes to full-text searching, because suddenly full-text searching was possible, which it wasn't in the late 80s, in normal contexts. But people have forgot about the relevance of browsing, which can be done, and is done now on the web, in sites that are so oriented.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought this was a great insight. Just one. I think I was on the panel with you when you did the Wright Miller presentation, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I think the single most difficult problem that we have going forward is dealing with structured text. E-treatises or treatises and statutes are the right examples. So it's a very difficult problem, and looking at it from the perspective of one of those other companies, nobody's solved this problem yet. It's a very difficult problem. And Ethan's perspective, I think, is a good one also. But the one thing I'd suggest to you is that I think you've got a little piece of it, and I think you've got that piece exactly right. It's what's not there that's one important thing. But I think, wouldn't you agree that there are other things that you figured out by going to look at the paper besides just what wasn't there? I mean, the context is the way you've described it, and it's not just what's in the white space. It's what are the related concepts and what other kinds of ideas that Wright and Miller are sort of structured around the idea of whether Larry Lessig should be allowed to be appointed as a special master or not. I mean, that other stuff is hard to figure out because it's near but not on point.
Yes, absolutely. Terry?
So, did I ever give you that reference to that Punch article from 1960 called Eco OK?
I don't think so.
Where it basically talked about why electronic stuff couldn't match up with book stuff. And it was a good description. I'll send you the reference.
I'd like to see that.
Good. But so what I've heard you say is what I'm taking away from this is it seems to me that we're like Mole and Lyndon Willows at the moment. Or like Bob Barron used to be, you know. You see, something that's right here once we bump into it, but we don't have a good sense, we don't have good peripheral vision. And you talked about that in three contexts. One is the context of a particular document, a long document like an e-book, that you see page after page, but it'd be sort of nice to know, where that page fits within the document. Then you've talked about it in terms of some statutes, treatises, more structured documents where you might think of a particular section of a statute as an independent document. That's the way West and other people present it, but actually it's part of a conceptual system that's a little bigger, and we don't see it in that sense. And then you talked about it in terms of bibliographic information by talking about what we've got now is good subject having access, very specific, good back of the book indexing technology now, plus keyword indexing, but we don't have that good front of the book table of contents classification approach, whether it's a traditional American library approach or even the EPC approach, which assigns multiple classes.
Right. And
that the electronic information environment really needs to develop work on this, providing more context of sort of these three different.
Yeah, but that's one of the areas in which I think there really has been some progress made. There are more and more active electronic tables of contents that give you at least that level of browsability. You can go to the table of contents, excuse me, and then click to the related material. One of the things that I miss is the back of the book index, not because I can't put in individual words and find them, but oftentimes when I open a book, I look at the index to see what's in the book, to get an idea of what the information density of the book is. And because electronic indexes are rarely browsable, that's one of the things that's missing. I have one electronic book, one e-book, that has implemented a conventional index, and I keep it around for that reason. It is the Quran. I don't know why it is, but someone did Quran that was meticulously cross-referenced so that you can go to the index section and touch it and go to the places in the Quran. Why? Where are the other books that do this?
Almost all technical manuals available in PDF form. They almost all have indexes, and you hit the page number of the index and you go to it. Very nicely done. And that's, I think, that joins up with what you were saying, and I think is that this is not strictly about technology versus paper or electronic versus paper. It's about different modes of being or thinking. And it's that there's a difference between the experience of being in a maze when there's a piece of cheese at the end and being in a maze where there's a Cracker Jack prize at every dead end. And they're both interesting things to do. They're both interesting ways to explore. If every dead end has something interesting and serendipitous, you get something that you don't have if there's one place and that's the right place to be and every place else is wrong. But if there's one right place to be, you get a prize at the end that's very different from sort of wandering around and seeing what you find. The difference has to do with someone having been there before, I think.
Right.
And and it has to do, it's the difference between being lost in the woods in England and being lost in the woods in a forest that's never been entered before. When you're lost in the woods in England, you know this is on a map. Somebody has marked this tree. This tree is on the map.
Yeah.
And at least I'm in a place that others have not. And when you're on what you've been describing as the electronic space, right? Nobody's been there before. You've created it, and you don't know when you're done. It fills a different need.
Yeah, that's really the essence of it as far as I'm concerned. You don't know when you're done. I have that tattooed on my chest. That's exactly how I feel.
Just wanted to say one word on that sense, on a sense of completeness when printing out something that you found on the web, like especially with a PDF document. There's really, in terms of searchability or this or that, I really don't see any gigantic differences in the space, but I still feel a greater sense of completeness when I print it out. But I think that just boils down to resolution. I think my eyes just appreciate the paper so much more just because it's, it's so much crisper that it feels more complete. But that's mostly a matter of resolution. In another 10 years, laptop resolutions will be high enough. I think that'll make a bigger difference in interpreting space.
Part of it's resolution, but part of it's history as well. I grew up looking at books, hard books, and what I layer on the technology is trying to find my old style of doing things with the new technology. I have what I call the MTV change that has occurred, and I look at kids that are in high school now, and my idea of multitasking is to have two things that are side by side, and I move back and forth between those. I look at kids that are listening to music, watching television, they've got a book in one place, they've got popcorn over here, and they're moving between those flawlessly, and it would irritate me beyond belief to be able to do that. And I think that the tools that are going to be necessary for students that have that kind of capability and that kind of history are different from what we have now.
Are they getting
Yes. Maybe that really is the answer, that this problem will be solved when those of us of my age or so all die. That it's a problem that we perceive, but it's not really a problem that's inherent in what it means to know things. Yes?
I don't even think it's so much as resolution as like the screen refreshing. I have a palm power, and I have documents on it, but if I want to skim the entire document, if I have it in paper, like just 50 pages, and there's no delay between the pages, and I can I can flip through 100 pages in a reasonable amount of time. If I want to do the same thing on something like palm power, you pull the button down, and the screen's not refreshing, and it flickers, and you lose that continuity.
Yeah. That sort of stuff you can do with an e-book reader. Yes.
I strongly disagree that it will go away because I work in a place where accuracy, authenticity, and all the stuff is very, very important. So I think what you're saying is you need the whole context, whether it's from a book or a case or a statute. You need the seamless whole. And you need to know things that you took for granted in paper. Did this come from CCH? Did it come from Joe Schmo down the street? You need to know those things, and you can't let go of them, whether it's paper or electronic.
I'm with you.
I came late, so if you answered this, by all means, let me know.
Oh, we didn't answer anything.
I enjoy the technology, but the one concern I have about students is, and I'm not sure if this is not continued to law students either, is whether the new technology discourages, intense concentration on things going forward. I worry that the attention span of my students is gone almost to a nanosecond. It's like the old days. Most of you have a remote in front of your television set. How many of you just play and go, as soon as the commercial comes on, go see another program back and forth? I worry, the one thing about a book, you have to sit there and engage with it. I worry that the technologies are extraordinarily distracting in certain ways, may prevent the kind of critical engagement that I think is so critical, so important in any field, not just law.
Good point. All right, well, it is 2:30 now, so thank you very much. Remember, Remember to fill out your evaluations, especially